We're continuing on the Eightfold Path. And this morning, I'm going to continue on right intention, rethinking toward imagination. And we give multiple choice words for the Eightfold Path, and not to confuse you, but to open up the translations. So we really want to talk about the path and the path factors in a way for you to be able to access them in the context of your experience. So, right, we often translate as skillful, appropriate, useful. Sometimes it's just easier to say right intention, but knowing that we include these multiple translations. Um, and today, with intention, it's usually translated as right intention, but also right thought or right resolve. Those are more of a traditional translations. And this part of the Eightfold Path is understood as cultivating wholesome intentions. So in the text, they talk about renunciation, about goodwill, about harmlessness. And when I put it that way, to me, it sounds kind of straightforward. We should think and intend in ways that are ethical and kind. Yes. But when we actually try to do this in our own minds, it can get complicated quickly. Um, we might not be so clear what our intentions are now, or if you're having what you might or someone else might consider the right intention. And sometimes we can shape our intentions. Um, they really are not so easy to control. They're not always so stable. And we might find ourselves trying to correct them um, and give even more pressure to ourselves, an inner pressure or a striving. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday. So today I'm going to draw from a translation that Stephen Batchelor proposed. And this is another way to understand sankapa. Rather than translating it as intention, he understood it as imagination. And that shift from intention to imagination, um, I like it because it opens something up. Instead of thinking about right intention as something we must get right, we can begin to explore or imagine our lives, how we envision the kind of person we want to become, the kind of world we want to participate in. And it connects naturally with reflective meditation. You know, you've heard us, many of you have heard us talk about creativity for years, long before we encountered this translation. And creativity involves curiosity and exploration and trying things out and staying with something over time to check out the experiment. Where does it go? How does this unfold? And that's very similar to what we do in meditation. We're not just stabilizing our attention. You know, we've talked about right samadhi and different ways we see concentration and focus. We're exploring experience. We're allowing thoughts and feelings and images to rise, not with the intention to get lost in them, though sometimes we will. Um, but we're doing this because they reveal something about how we live. And in reflection, we're remembering, reflecting, rethinking, and likely refeeling our experience. We're getting a few chances to do this in practice. So imagination plays a role in this. And the example that came to mind is one I've used before of myself going to a concert. And the next day in meditation, I found myself remembering someone there. He was an elderly gentleman in a wheelchair. And at the time, he wasn't central to my experience of the concert. But in the meditation, I began imagining what his life might have been like, or even what his experience of hearing the music would have been like, where he was sitting. And some of the imaginings in meditation were probably inaccurate. But what surprised me was the sense of connection that came from it. Imagination helped me move beyond my own perspective and feel a kinship with him, this person I didn't know. He wasn't really a large part of my experience at the time. But it didn't stop there. It extended into a greater sensitivity to accessibility in music venues, in parking, in walking trails, really heightenedly aware of different bodies moving through this world. And that is a direction I want to go. That feels like an ethical direction to become more aware of that. So this is the one, one of the ways imagination can support empathy. There's the walking a mile in someone else's shoes. Well, I only walked one meditation in this case, but it really took me somewhere. And we often need to imagine ourselves in another person's situation in order to care more, to care a little bit. And if we exclude thinking and imagining from meditation, I feel we could be excluding a very important human capacity that's being developed in doing so. So I'll also kind of bring in the other side of we're not really suggesting that we indulge in fantasies or idealize who we could become. Though that may happen, we hope that peters out a little bit or gets seen into, because that's another side. Imagination needs to be grounded. And I know this very well from my singing and songwriting hobby that I've developed. I've imagined so many versions in meditation, lyrics, duets, harmonies, violin solos that would pull at your heartstrings if you could just hear them. But when I actually go to write a piece of music, or I practice, or I talk with others about forming a girl band, really more like a folk harmony trio, but I encounter other conditions, writer's block, friends' lack of interest or time, my own enthusiasm, but very limited skills. So not everything I can imagine can be created, but the imagining still plays a role. It opens up possibilities, even if those possibilities need to be shaped by my reality. So we begin to see a balance here, or do you see a balance? I kind of do. I see a little bit of a balance coming in that imagination can inspire intention, but the conditions still determine what's possible. If we imagine too far beyond what the conditions can support, we often feel disappointed or self-critical. And I've long used an inner check system with myself, because I actually have a vision of me stretching too far, like beyond my arms, beyond my fingertips, where I no longer really can hold what I'm attempting to do. So I usually kind of check myself before putting in too much effort and really questioning, what can I hold now? What can I hold in the future? So rather than chasing these idealized intentions, I think we balance it with what's possible given the conditions. So this is, I think, a slightly different way of relating to right intention. It's less about control and more about exploration. And, we're not into getting it right. But we'd like to have a little more understanding how imagination conditions the shape of our life, because I think it's a very uplifting, important and valuable and ethical quality, this path factor. And it works with the other ones, but in isolation, it's kind of fun to think about. It gives a little bit more creativity and uplift to some material that could be more dry or uninspiring. Okay. I'm going to end the talk this morning here, and welcome.